In the very first episode of House of the Dragon, Viserys Targaryen states that dragons are a power man should never have trifled with. He says this before the skull of his own dragon, Balerion the Black Dread, the biggest dragon to ever live, and his words are echoed as true in the Season 1 finale. This is when his son, Aemond, kills his grandson, Lucerys, both of which are riding dragons that they are not properly controlling, due to circumstances that the dragons should not be involved in. This is a childhood dispute, but the people in this childhood dispute happen to have weapons of mass destruction. Dragons are not creatures that can be so easily controlled, and throughout the history of A Song of Ice and Fire and House of the Dragon, we've seen multiple cases of dragons slipping free of their owner's control. And today we're going to examine a few examples of this occurring. The most immediate example of this happening comes from the main series, namely A Dance with Dragons, the 5th book and the 5th season of the HBO show. We see Daenerys unable to control her dragon, Drogon, and it is worth noting that I got a lot of comments about this in my Vermithor video. Daenerys has 3 dragons, but she is only bonded to Drogon. That is why Drogon is the only dragon she ever rides. But regardless of this, Drogon is out of control for most of Book 5. He leaves Meereen to do his own thing, and ends up coming back when Daenerys is in danger, and eventually the two of them fly off together. However, he is still not able to be controlled once the two of them have gone off together. He just kind of sits down to nap, whereas Daenerys is left to her own devices in the Dothraki Sea, suffering through some health problems, and eventually getting picked up by a Khalasar. So this shows that Daenerys has begun the bonding process with Drogon, but is not in complete and total control of him yet. If such a thing even is possible, we see throughout the main series that Drogon is still an individual and has his own will. For the next example, we need to travel back in time a bit to Balerion the Black Dread, the dragon of Aegon the Conqueror and Viserys I, its first and fourth riders respectively. However, we're going to be talking about its third rider, Princess Aerea Targaryen. Aerea was pretty young when she claimed Balerion. She's the daughter of Aegon the Uncrowned, who was a person who should have been king, but he was killed by his uncle Maegor. Aerea claimed Balerion from Dragonstone, and Balerion just suddenly flew off with Aerea on his back. Aerea was absolutely not in control of this. Balerion just kind of took her along for the ride immediately after she claimed him. The two of them were gone for well over a year, and they were not sighted anywhere on the entire continent of Westeros, nor anywhere else in the world, Essos, or anywhere near Westeros at the very least. The theory is that they went to Valyria, the smoking ruins of the civilization that the Targaryens initially came from. Unfortunately, this journey has a very unhappy ending. Valyria is cursed. No one is able to enter or exit safely, and no one has ever been able to return to tell the tale of exactly what is there. However, Aerea briefly returned, though she was unable to tell the tale. In 56 AC, Balerion and Aerea landed in King's Landing 2 years after they departed. Aerea was barely clinging to Balerion's back and very ill. She was treated by the Grand Maester at the time, who took notes on what was happening. When he took her into his chambers and examined her, he found that she had these creatures living within her skin, these tiny, almost lizard-like parasites that were burrowing within her. They put her in an ice bath, and she essentially exploded into all of these worms that died immediately because they were so hot, and the ice just immediately killed them. Balerion was also not unscathed. Balerion was the largest creature known in the world at that time, but Balerion was heavily injured when he arrived in King's Landing. The Maesters state that he had a 9-foot-long wound open on his side. So whatever was within Valyria seems as though it was bigger than Balerion and served some massive danger to Aerea. It seems as though Balerion was just acting on his own will and returning to the place of his birth, as Balerion was the last Targaryen dragon to be born in Old Valyria. We know of one other instance of Balerion not obeying its owner, and that is the one time that Viserys flew on him. This is not something that was known from Fire and Blood, but rather was elaborated on by Ryan Condal, the creator of the show, in a podcast. And I think this is quite interesting. I think it's probably canon for the books. We just have no way of knowing about it if the Fire and Blood is from the historical perspective that it is currently using. Particularly, he says in the podcast that Viserys realized on that fight with Balerion that he was completely out of control. Balerion could have done whatever he wanted. Viserys was lucky that Balerion was old and did not want to fly anywhere else. So they just circled around King's Landing once and landed back in the dragon pit. However, this is what instilled in Viserys that fear of dragons, that kind of lingering element that he seems to hold even in his old age, as he doesn't really seem to be affectionate towards even the idea of dragons. We never see him on screen with the dragon, save for the skull of Balerion, almost as if he seems content knowing the fact that his old mount is dead. Our last example is perhaps the most interesting. I certainly think it's the most interesting. It comes from the year 58 AC, 2 years after Aerea and Balerion return, and the dragon involved is Silverwing, the dragon of good Queen Alysanne. Alysanne was the wife of King Jaehaerys and the most beloved queen the realm has ever known. They were accompanied on a progress throughout the entire realm, and this is when they went to Winterfell. There's a theory that Silverwing laid a clutch of eggs in Winterfell, but the thing that's most interesting about this trip to me is the fact that Alysanne flew Silverwing to the Wall. Upon arriving at the Wall, Alysanne noted that Silverwing does not like it. The dragon would hiss and snap at every chilly gust of wind coming down from the Wall. Alysanne attempted on 3 separate occasions to fly Silverwing north, beyond the Wall, but the dragon refused and veered south every time. The fact that Silverwing refused to fly over the Wall implies some really interesting stuff about the magic of the Wall and of this world that could kind of show the duality of the ice and the fire in this story. Perhaps the Wall had more magic in it than we initially thought, in that maybe it was a pact of some sort binding the ice to one side and the fire to another. Of course, season 7 and 8 of the show kind of destroy this idea as Daenerys and her dragons fly over the Wall with no issue whatsoever. But at that point in the show, I do not think they were at all concerned with any of the mystical elements kind of imbued in the source material, as has been so many times expressed by the 2 creators, David and Dan. All of this sets the context for what happens in the season 1 finale of House of the Dragon. Dragons disobeying their owners and not understanding what exactly is happening with the feud between Luke and Aemond. It makes sense that Vhagar would not fully obey Aemond once a gout of fire is splashed in her face, as she's never been attacked by another dragon before, at least as far as we know. So it really does make sense that Aemond is unable to control this creature who is well over a century old at this point. It also makes sense that Viserys is unable to control his young dragon Arrax, who just panics at the sight of this much larger lizard attacking them. That's why I've really come around on this change. I wasn't the biggest fan upon my first viewing, but I really like it in retrospect, as well as the depth it adds to both the magical lore and to Aemond as a character. I think it's great on both fronts and really makes a lot of sense with the established lore of Westeros and the entire world of A Song of Ice and Fire. So yeah, that's been my video on dragons, the sword with no hilt, and how they can be dangerous to all those who use them. I think that Viserys was very much right in that. And hey, if you enjoyed this video, be sure to leave a like, subscribe, do all that YouTube stuff that I'd really appreciate. Leave a comment down below, talk about what you think of these dragon rules, what happens when dragons are not properly used, and which dragon is your favorite overall. I'd love to hear your thoughts on both the series as a whole, as well as any content you'd like to see me cover in the future. Anyway, thank you all for watching. Have a good one.